My name is Daniel Boyd. I'm 49, and I've spent the last 15 years working as an aircraft mechanic at Denver International. Honest work, steady pay. I help keep planes in the air and people safe. I always believed I had a solid marriage, too. Right up until the morning my wife decided to find out exactly how far she could push me. That morning, she came down the stairs holding 2 swimsuits like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. One was simple and modest. The other was barely anything at all. A few strips of black fabric. "Which one makes me look more free?" she asked, holding up the black bikini. I didn't ask who she wanted to look free for. I already knew. "Renee," I said, using the name I'd called her for 22 years. "Are you planning to swim, or are you putting on a show?" She laughed. Not the laugh I fell in love with in college. This one felt sharp, planned. "Oh, come on, Daniel. Miles and I are just catching up. It's been years since we really talked." Miles Foster, her old college boyfriend, lately slipping back into her life like oil leaking through a worn seal. Every time his name lit up her phone, her whole face changed. New clothes, new perfume. Talk about needing to find herself at 46. I set my coffee down and looked her straight in the eye. "If you go on that trip with him, I'm done." Calm. No yelling, just a plain statement, like I was telling her it might rain. She froze, then smiled slowly. "You're not serious, Daniel. You don't give ultimatums. You're Mr. Reliable. Mr. Fix Everything Quietly." "Exactly," I said. "That's why you should listen." "I need this trip," she said, turning away. "I need to remember who I was before I became this." She waved her hand around the kitchen, around the house, around the life we'd built. "And what am I supposed to be while you're remembering?" "You'll be here," she said, not turning back. "You always are." That was the moment it hit me. She hadn't just taken me for granted. She'd completely forgotten I could leave. 22 years of being the steady one, the dependable one. Somewhere along the way, she'd started believing that meant I'd never walk away. That afternoon I watched her pack, playing music too young for her, posting vague things about new beginnings. When she left, she kissed my cheek like she was running to the store. "Don't wait up! You've got your tools and your sports channel, right?" I didn't answer. I stood at the window and watched the car disappear down the street, taking my wife toward another man and away from everything we'd built. Then I walked into my workshop and opened a drawer I'd hoped I'd never need. Inside was an envelope. On the front, in my own handwriting, Plan D. People think quiet men do nothing. They're wrong. Quiet men just plan their moves better. 3 hours after her plane took off, I sat in my truck outside a law office. That envelope had been sitting in my house for 6 months, waiting for this exact moment. Property transfers, trust documents, lease agreements. All legal, all final. I've always believed in being ready ahead of time. My phone buzzed, my niece Paige. "Uncle Daniel, is it time?" "It's time. Are you ready?" "Already on my way. Keys are on the counter. Spare bedroom. I know what to do." Paige had been part of the plan for months. 25, sharp, never liked how Renee treated me. When I first told her, she only asked one question. "What took you so long?" The law office was exactly what I expected. Dark wood everywhere, shelves full of heavy books, the kind of place where serious decisions get made. Mr. Sorensen was a thin man with gray hair and a firm handshake, the kind of man who'd seen just about every kind of mess people could create. "Mr. Boyd, are you certain you want to go through with this?" I handed him the envelope. "Everything signed, witnessed, notarized. I just need you to file it." He went through the papers carefully. The property transfer moved our house out of joint ownership into a trust I'd set up years earlier. The lease placed a new tenant, Diane Cole, into the home legally. "This is thorough," he said. "Your wife won't have any legal options." "None. She signed off on the trust back in 2019 during estate planning. Said she trusted me, didn't need to read everything." I paused. Turns out, trust goes both ways. These get filed Monday morning. By the time she's back, everything's already in effect. He asked one more question. "What if she comes back early?" "She won't. She's too busy enjoying herself." Outside, I checked my phone. A photo already. Her, smiling, at the airport. Adventure awaits. She had no idea that while she chased her past, I was closing the door on her future. After 24 years, I'd learned one thing. She always underestimated quiet people. I drove home to an empty house. For the first time in a long while, it felt peaceful. The next morning, the photos started. Renee always loved social media, but now it was non-stop. Every shot carefully staged, like she wanted me to see exactly what I was missing. Poolside, red bikini, drink in hand. Finally living my life. I studied that picture the way I'd inspect a damaged aircraft part. Slowly. In the reflection of her sunglasses, barely visible, a table set for 3. 3 glasses. 3 plates. A man's hand that didn't belong to Miles. A gold Rolex. Older skin. Someone else was there. Someone with money. I zoomed until the image broke apart. A bottle in the corner. Opus 1 Cabernet, roughly $800. Miles was a personal trainer who drove a beater. There was no way he was paying for that. Paige called. "Uncle Daniel, you need to see this." A link to a resort's private terrace restaurant. Reservation only, formal dress required. I called the resort myself. No reservation under Renee Boyd. None under her maiden name. None under Miles Foster. This wasn't a simple trip. Someone else was funding it and keeping his name hidden. Another photo. Beach shot, but the umbrella logo caught my eye. Not the hotel she'd told me about. The Ritz-Carlton. Whoever this man was, he had real money. I forwarded everything to Sorensen. "Move faster. File everything first thing Monday." Sunday evening, there was a knock at my door. Diane Cole stood there with a suitcase in her hand. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind you get after surviving hard times. 54, put together without trying to look younger, clearly knew how to handle herself. "Mr. Boyd," she said, offering her hand. "Thank you for this opportunity." "Call me Daniel," I said, stepping aside. "Welcome in." She walked through the house calmly, taking mental notes. Ran her fingers across counters that had been ignored for months. Straightened pillows without a word. For the first time in a long while, it felt like someone was actually taking care of the place. And I was finally taking care of myself. "Your wife had interesting taste," she said carefully. "Ex-wife. That's the right tense now." She nodded like she understood immediately. "The lease is solid. 6-month minimum, utilities included, first month already paid." I handed her the keys. "When she comes back, don't argue. Don't bargain. This is your home now. I'll handle whatever trouble she tries to start." Diane smiled a little. "I've been through divorce before. Women like your wife think they can scare other women into backing off. She hasn't met me." That night, I helped Diane get settled into the main bedroom. She came prepared. Her own sheets, her own framed pictures, even her own coffee machine. By the time we were done, the room barely looked like the one Renee had left behind. As I was heading toward the guest room, she stopped me. "One thing," she said. "Why are you being this generous to someone you barely know?" I stood in the doorway a second before answering. "Because you're not the one who broke my vows. And because every man deserves to come home to somebody who actually wants to be there." Her face softened. "She really doesn't understand what she's throwing away, does she?" "No," I said, "but she's about to." Monday, Sorensen called. Everything filed, every safeguard in place. Renee's flight landed at 3:47. I was at work, same as always, keeping planes safe while the rest of my life shifted under my feet. Only this time, I wasn't going down with it. Tuesday afternoon, bent over an engine, my phone started buzzing non-stop. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, texts sliding from confused to angry to panicked. "Why won't the garage open? Did you change the code?" Ryan: "Daniel, this isn't funny. I'm tired and want to come home. Call me right now." I didn't. Paige called around 4. "Uncle Daniel, you need to hear this," she said. "Your wife came back to the house. She couldn't get in." I leaned against the maintenance cart and listened. "She stood out there trying code after code for almost 20 minutes, Paige said. Then she checked the windows. Then she checked the hidden key spot." I could picture the whole thing clearly. Renee standing on the porch of what used to be her home, still dressed like vacation hadn't ended, expecting the house to just open up and welcome her back. When none of that worked, she rang the bell. And Diane answered? Yep, cool as can be, very polite, very formal. Told her she'd need to contact the property manager if she was having access problems. That would be me, apparently. That would be you, Paige laughed. She started yelling it was her house, demanded to know who Diane was. Diane told her she was the legal tenant and shut the door. Then she called me, screaming about lawyers and theft. I told her everything had been done legally and maybe she should have paid attention to what she was signing all those years ago. By 5:30, the calls stopped. Then a text from a number I didn't know. "This is Martin Reyes, attorney for Mrs. Boyd. We need to discuss this matter immediately." I forwarded it to Sorensen. "Looks like it's starting." He called back within minutes. "Reyes made a lot of noise, threatened all kinds of action. Doesn't have much to stand on. Your documents are airtight." That night, driving home, I passed the house. My house. 15 years. The workshop I'd built with my own hands. Every leak and hinge I'd fixed. Warm light in the windows now. Renee's rental car parked across the street. Her sitting behind the wheel, staring like she could change everything back just by looking long enough. I kept driving, to my rental apartment 2 blocks away. I already knew what tomorrow would bring, and I slept better than I had in a long time. Wednesday morning brought round 2. Reyes called at 7. "Mr. Boyd, you have 24 hours to restore Mrs. Boyd's access to the marital home, or we seek emergency relief through the court." "You might want to check the property records first," I said, buttoning my shirt. "That house hasn't been marital property since 2019. It's held in an irrevocable trust. Your client signed willingly, and she triggered the occupancy clause by abandoning the residence for more than 48 hours without notice." Silence. Then, "We'll see about that." 2 hours later, Sorensen called. Reyes filed the emergency motion. Judge dismissed it immediately. Didn't even grant a hearing. Told him he should have done his homework. Next move? Fraud, coercion, duress, anything they can think of to attack the trust. Won't work. She signed everything in front of witnesses, had separate counsel available, had the mandatory review period. No weakness. That afternoon, Diane called. "Your ex-wife came back," she said. "This time she brought a locksmith." I stopped what I was doing and stepped away from the aircraft. "What happened?" "I called the police," she said plainly. "I showed them the lease and my identification with this address listed as my residence. The officers informed her that what she was attempting could be treated as unlawful entry." "How did she handle that?" "Poorly. She started shouting that I was a homewrecker and that you'd replaced her with a stranger. The officers were not impressed." That evening, Paige sent a screenshot. Renee's post. "When someone you trust for 24 years destroys your life while you're trying to rediscover yourself. Betrayed, heartbroken, homeless." The comments got her. Her sister, "Actions have consequences." Her best friend, "You made your choice." Even her yoga instructor, "Maybe this is a chance for honest self-reflection." The polished image she'd spent years building was cracking open, and everyone could finally see what was underneath. Then a text. "Please, Daniel, can we just talk? I made a mistake, but this has gone too far." For the first time, I answered. "You didn't make a mistake, Renee. You made a choice. Now you get to live with it." Then I blocked her number. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Thursday night, Diane and I were halfway through dinner when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," she said, calm. "I know exactly who that is. Time we met properly." The front door opened. Then I heard Renee's voice, high and sharp and already angry. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my house?" "My name is Diane Cole. I live here. And you are?" "I'm Renee Boyd. This is my house." "I believe you're mistaken. This residence is leased to me. You may want to contact the property manager." I got up and moved to the living room doorway, staying back, but close enough in case things got worse. Renee stood on the porch in expensive clothes that still looked fresh off a luxury vacation, her face red with anger and disbelief. "Daniel!" she yelled when she saw me. "Tell this woman to get out of our house!" "It's not our house anymore, Renee. You saw to that when you chose your weekend with Miles." "We were married 24 years. I made one mistake. People make mistakes." "No," I said. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. What you did was a decision. You thought it through, you packed for it, you traded our marriage for it." Her eyes went from me to Diane and back. I watched it click. We weren't awkward around each other. We were settled. Easy. Her voice cracked. "You're sleeping with her." "Where I sleep is none of your concern," Diane said. "What should concern you is that you're standing on private property and refusing to leave." "I did not replace you," I told Renee. "You walked away. I kept going." Then she started crying. Not the soft kind, meant to persuade. This was the ugly kind, the kind that comes when somebody finally realizes they've lost something for good. "Please," she said, "I'll end it with Miles. I'll come back. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." I looked at her, standing there in clothes bought for somebody else's getaway, wearing jewelry I'd never seen before, probably paid for by whoever had really funded that trip, and I knew there was nothing left to fix. She stood there looking wrecked, confused, so unfamiliar to me it was hard to connect her to the woman I'd once married. "Renee," I said in a calm voice, "there's nothing left to repair. What you broke is gone for good." Diane stepped forward. "I think it's time for you to leave. If you have legal questions, your attorney can contact the proper people." Renee looked at us both one more time, then turned without a word and walked to a rental car. She'd left her own at the airport. "Well," Diane said, shutting the door, "that went smoother than I expected." Friday morning brought the call I'd been waiting on. Sorensen's voice was serious. "You may want to sit down. My investigator finished looking into your wife's recent activities. This is worse than we expected." "How much worse?" "The man in those resort photos? Not some random wealthy traveler. Victor Castellano. Owns Castellano Construction. Married. 3 kids. Federal investigators have already been looking into him for bid rigging and tax evasion." I set my wrench down. Federal investigation. It just keeps getting better. "There's more. Your wife's been making cash deposits into a separate account for 6 months. 25,000 so far. Every deposit just under the federal reporting threshold." Things that hadn't made sense started lining up. The sudden girls' nights. The jewelry. The nicer clothes. She hadn't just been cheating. She'd been getting paid. What does that mean for me legally? It means your wife may be tangled in money laundering. It means when federal agents come knocking, you want to be standing as far from this as possible. That evening, Diane was waiting with coffee already poured. I told her everything. "Do you understand what this could mean?" she asked. "For you, I mean. Husbands and wives can get pulled into each other's financial messes. If anyone asks what you knew and when, that matters." "I'd gather every piece of documentation you have," she said. "Bank records, credit card statements, anything showing you had no knowledge. And I wouldn't wait for the government to find your name on their own." Saturday morning, I made 2 calls. First, Sorensen. Cooperate fully with any federal inquiry. Then, the FBI field office in Denver. "Special Agent Reeves speaking. My name is Daniel Boyd. I have information about Victor Castellano I believe your office needs." A lot of marriages end in arguments. Some in tears, some in court. Mine was ending with federal agents and money laundering. At least it was ending honestly. 3 weeks later, Agent Reeves called with an update. "We arrested Castellano and 3 associates this morning. Your wife's name came up during questioning." What kind of charges? Money laundering, tax evasion, bribery of public officials. Castellano was paying bribes to city council members to secure contracts. Your wife appears to have served as one of the intermediaries. What does that mean for Renee? Facing federal charges as an accessory, we found records of payments totaling more than $40,000 routed through accounts in her name. She claims she didn't know what the money was for. The evidence points the other way. Paige called that afternoon. Aunt Renee got arrested this morning, picked up at her sister's place. How's she taking it? Bad. Keep saying you're the only person who can help her. Tell her to talk to her lawyer. She doesn't have one anymore. Reyes dropped her the second the federal charges showed up. That evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. I knew the sound behind it. A jail phone system. Daniel, please don't hang up. Her voice was small, worn down. I need help. I need a lawyer. I need money for bail. I never thought any of this would happen. What exactly did you think was going to happen when you started accepting money from a man under federal investigation? I didn't know. Victor said it was just money for companionship. I repeated it back slowly. Money for companionship. She went quiet, then crying. I need money for a lawyer. I can't help you with that. You're my husband. You have to help me. Ex-husband. As of yesterday, the divorce is final. Finalized while you were being arrested. Silence, except her breathing. Daniel, please. I know I made bad choices, but I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me. You threw away 24 years of trust for money from a criminal. That's not an error in judgment. That's a decision. What am I supposed to do now? Not my problem anymore. But here's one piece of advice. Tell the truth to anyone willing to listen. That's probably your only chance. I ended the call and turned the phone off. Diane reached across the table and took my hand. You did the right thing. Did I? Yes. You can't rescue somebody who refuses to save themselves. Outside, snow started falling, covering the yard in a clean white silence. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard, my house now, fully and truly, watching Diane kneel in the dirt, planting rose bushes where Renee's old vegetable garden used to be. Back then, that garden had been one more unfinished idea, abandoned after a couple weeks. This was different. Diane planned carefully. She followed through. Hand me the watering can, she said, brushing off her gloves. Any news from the case? She asked a little later. Sorensen called this morning. Renee took a plea deal. 3 years federal, full restitution. How do you feel? Relieved, I said honestly. It's finally over. The doorbell rang. Paige was standing there with Luke Cole, Diane's son, and, as of the month before, Paige's fiancé. Their relationship had grown naturally through all of this, mostly helping with the house. We picked a date, Luke said. June 15th. We were hoping to do it here in the backyard if that's all right with you two. Diane, gardening gloves still on, smiled wider than I'd seen in months. A garden wedding. I love that. That evening, the four of us sat out back watching planes come in toward the airport. The same view I'd known for 15 years, but everything else different. Instead of complaints about the noise, I was listening to wedding plans, and Diane talking about turning the spare room into a home office. Daniel, Luke said, I want to thank you for what you did for my mother. After my father died, she never thought she'd feel at home anywhere again. I reached over and took Diane's hand. She saved me too. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is finding out he's stronger than he thought. My phone buzzed, a text from Miles Foster. Heard about Renee. Sorry, man. Hope you're doing all right. I showed it to Diane. She lifted an eyebrow. Answering that? No, I deleted the message. That part of my life is over. As the sun dropped behind the mountains, I realized what all of this had taught me. Marriage isn't about holding on to someone who might leave. It's about building a life worth staying in, with someone who actually wants to be there. Renee walked away because she thought something better was waiting somewhere else. What she found was fake, expensive, shiny, empty. Diane stayed because she understood something simpler. Real happiness comes from building something real with someone who values it too. At 49, I was starting over, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be.
There's a lot happening underneath this story, and it's worth separating the emotional core from the escalating plot around it. Start with the opening test, the 2 swimsuits, the deliberate provocation. That's not a wardrobe question, it's a probe. She's checking, consciously or not, whether the boundary she's about to cross has any real resistance behind it. When he answers with a calm, specific ultimatum rather than pleading or rage, he's doing something that's easy to underrate. He's giving her accurate information about consequences before she acts, not after. Most people only discover where a boundary was after they've already crossed it. Here, the boundary was named out loud, and she chose to test it anyway. Second, notice the years of groundwork behind his response. The trust, the lease, the tenant arrangement, none of that was improvised in the heat of betrayal. It existed because he'd correctly read a pattern building for months and decided to prepare for an outcome he hoped wouldn't happen. That's a meaningfully different posture than revenge planning. Revenge is designed after the injury. This was closer to insurance, purchased while the marriage was technically still intact, which is part of why it held up legally. It wasn't retaliatory in structure, even though its effect clearly was. Third, there's her comment, "You'll be here, you always are," which is worth sitting with because it names the exact failure mode of being taken for granted. Reliability over enough years can quietly get recoded by a partner as immovability, as though steadiness were a fixed trait rather than a choice being renewed. The story's turning point isn't really the affair. It's the moment a dependable person demonstrates, concretely, that dependability was never the same thing as inability to leave. Fourth, the introduction of Diane deserves an honest look, because the story leans on her a lot to carry the emotional resolution. She's calm where Renee is reactive, grounded where Renee is performative, and the contrast is clearly doing narrative work, but it's also worth noticing that a rebound presented as the real thing, this quickly, is itself a kind of story a person tells themselves in the aftermath of betrayal. That doesn't make the relationship false. It does mean the speed and neatness of it deserves a little skepticism, the same way any account does when the new partner is framed as flawless the moment the old one becomes the villain. Finally, the criminal subplot changes the moral shape of the ending in an important way. Once Renee's actions cross from betrayal into financial crime, the story stops being primarily about a marriage and becomes about consequences that were never really in his control. It's worth being clear-eyed about that shift. His calm withdrawal reads very differently once the stakes include federal charges rather than just a broken vow. The 2 threads, personal betrayal and criminal exposure, get folded together, and it's worth not letting the second one retroactively justify every emotional beat of the first. The lesson underneath the story? Being the reliable one in a relationship isn't a guarantee that gets cashed later. It has to be met, ongoingly, with something in return: attention, honesty, basic regard. When it isn't, the quiet person doesn't necessarily stay quiet forever. Sometimes, they're just doing the paperwork before they say so.